Right, we're just about to move on to the next panel called Managing a Release. I have three people coming from different aspects of modern management on the panel. And we're going to look at what's involved in the new way of releasing a record. I'm particularly interested in how you actually get an artist even to the starting post. One of the roles I fulfill is as Director of Performer Affairs at PPL. And I'm aware that last year, on average, PPL licensed 6,500 new recordings every week. So trying to get through the noise of that, even to get to the starting gate, I think is where I'd like to start the discussion. So I have with me Denise Allan, who manages Glasvegas, Mark Melton, who's a music business lawyer, and Michael Lambert, I'm sure who will be very well known to all of you, who's a local manager of great fame and repute. And we're going to go basically dive straight into that particular question. So Michael, how do you think you initially get beyond all that background noise to get an artist noticed?
For us, it's about taking a lot of time and being really careful about how you do things and being really planned out with everything. So, you know, I think the key thing is that artists shouldn't feel the need to immediately upload music online and share it with the world straight away. They shouldn't feel the need to get out and play gigs straight away without much rehearsal and that kind of thing. So I certainly encourage the acts that I work with to get the live show great in the rehearsal room before they step on a stage, and to make sure that the first thing that they're going to put out there is really high quality, and that we then contact the right people and try and get a bit of buzz going that way rather than bombarding people. So it's really, for us, it's about being selective about who you contact and trying to get the right sort of tastemakers interested, and then building it up from there, getting the band out live, doing the right kind of support slots, and building an audience, collecting email addresses, and trying to sort of garner a fan base in the area that you're thinking about putting something out.
I know, Denise, obviously you've got a really very well established act with Glasvegas, so that's not the issue. But I think you've got some startups as well. So how would you go about doing
That's
that?
the million-dollar question.
Okay.
Yeah, there's probably lots and lots of ways to actually go about doing it, but I think everything comes from the music. So the music needs to be, you need to be the most confident in the music as possible. So I guess leaving the artist to really develop and understand who they are and how they want to present themselves to the world is really important. And then everything is built up from there. So from that point, then we would probably, do a demo, maybe put out a single, but also establish relationships with other people that we think would be useful for that artist. And then hopefully through our contacts, through the music being amazing, through a very linear, consistent presentation of this artist and their music, and a wee bit of magic, hopefully it would all come together and suddenly the stars would align. So I think you've actually got to be really, really selective in what you want to do, and not probably bombard people with lots and lots of music, with different styles. I think that we always take a kind of stance that less is more.
I'm a music business lawyer, but until a couple of weeks ago, I also used to lecture one day a week at a music business course in Guildford in Surrey. And I became fascinated by this artist. There's an artist called Lapsley, who is still at an early stage of her career. She's an electronic musician who sings as well, from Liverpool. And I'd got tipped off about her from a couple of different management companies who in the end both failed to sign her. So I listened to the music. Now, the first thing I'm saying there is tip-offs. And I think that was mentioned in the earlier panel. We're a business that talks to each other. So if a manager I respect says to me as a lawyer, "Oh, we're thinking of signing this artist," I'll probably follow up on that and try and make contact with the artist, see if they have a lawyer. If they haven't, so sort of talk to them about whether they'd be interested in me representing them. But the reason this particular one really fascinated me is because I was then told that this particular artist did her first ever gig in Liverpool And at that gig were sort of half a dozen of the largest management companies in the country, including Adele's management. Virtually every A&R person in the country was at this gig in Liverpool, plus press, bloggers, the whole lot. Now, how did that artist manage to get all these people to come to her first ever gig? Now, she may, it's early days, she may not break through and succeed. I hope she does, because I think she's very talented. But I got my students looking at this to see if we could establish, sort of follow the trail back. And it all seemed to start with a track that came out in the first week in January. And then once you started putting things into Google, you could see that a couple of blogs were starting to write about this track. Now, who had tipped the blogs off? That's the missing piece of information. We don't know that. Did they just discover it organically? Did the artist herself write to some of these blogs? What did someone on her behalf, a PR person? That I don't know, but what we could see was that one or two blogs were starting to write about it and say how good the track was. It was one track on SoundCloud and a little sort of homemade YouTube video as well. Not a lot of money spent on it at all. And then other blogs started to follow. You saw the dates of when people were writing about it. So it was almost as if the blogs were looking at what each other were doing. And so one would follow another, probably thinking, okay, we better get on this artist as well because others are writing about it and she seems to be quite cool, so we want to look cool, so we'll write about it. So that's really all I managed to extract out of that. But I think the blogs do play a serious role nowadays in getting you noticed.
Okay, let's assume we've got beyond that first stage. It's got to the point where releases don't happen the way they used to happen. Before, you'd build up to a release and you'd put it out to radio and then there would be a release date. Now the concept almost of a release date has nearly gone, and you're talking about an impact date, a date where everything comes together and people really become aware and the activity peaks. What would you expect to happen before the impact date, on the impact date, and then afterwards? Michael?
It's a lot of stuff. I should probably start by saying that we, as the company that we run, the reason that we set it up was that there wasn't a deal in place for the artists for one reason or another, and we wanted to self-release with the acts but do a good job of it. And we were making contact with lots of different companies and saying, could you put a distribution deal in place for X artists? And they were saying, oh, we don't really want to work with artists. And I was like, well, but they're managed. No, we don't want to do that either. What about if it's a label? Oh yeah, we do deals with labels. So we went, okay, right, well, we'll set up a label then. So, even though our management company has a label, it's not really a record company. It's really just using the tag of a label. So we're very much learning as we go. But with the most recent release for us, it was about basically a whole year campaign before the release date, and starting that off with putting out a single online that people could stream, then a few months later following up with a video, and then some tour dates to kind of get some buzz going, and then another video after that. And then I suppose the impact date for us would really be when we released another video along with a pre-order of the album. So really for a 3-week period before the album was officially coming out, people were able to get their hands on it. And then as Stuart was chatting about in the session before, with iTunes we did the instant grat thing, so that you can, as soon as you pre-order it, you can get a track. And that basically allowed us to build up momentum and buzz for like 2 months, as opposed to doing it in the lead into a release date and then nothing afterwards, So that's kind of how we went about things this time round, and it seems to be working quite well. And then after that, we're talking about following up with the tour a month later, and then announcing some more live dates, so that you're really trying to extend the campaign to the end of the year. So the album campaign ends up being almost a 2-year window, as opposed to quite a short space of time where you push everything and then stop.
Yeah, and Glasvegas were in a different position, weren't they? Because obviously they were an established act coming out of a deal, but looking to then release more material. So what was your process?
Yeah, I think for that, so they came out their deal with Columbia, and then after that we had an established fan base, all over the world, and I think there was still a great deal of demand for them to release music. So at that point, Dean and I guess we look round at the different options and, you know, we think, what should we do? Should we go with another major label again? You know, what was their experience like? Should we go with an independent where there'll probably be a higher royalty rate, but now we actually have an established fan base, so that could work out quite well for us, you know. But at the same time, they don't have the same degree of infrastructure that a major label does. So we were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, deciding where to go next. And then a long-standing friend of ours, he started to work for a company, publishing company actually, called BMG. And they started a new model called Master Rights. And that model really integrated like both parts of major and independent. And you know, a truly independent where the artist is making a lot of the decisions, and a lot of the onus was in Dean and I to, you know, move forward with the whole, you know, planning and execution of releasing the album. The difference, I suppose, you know, between, you know, other deals or going truly independent like yourself was that this was a partnership. Very much a partnership that was involved, you know, so we would bring something to the table, they would bring something to the table. They would also have they also had an international infrastructure, if you like, albeit very, very basic. So similar again to a major label, but in a very, very reduced scale. But one of the main differences was that the royalty rate was far more favourable towards an artist than both an independent label and a major label. But the most crucial part that that really kind of swayed it for us was the fact that Glasvegas are very independently minded, which is a pain in the ass quite a lot of the time. But we needed to collaborate with somebody that we felt could give us the space to make a lot of the decisions, whether it be musically, artistically, or any of the partnerships that were developed. And that really kind of swayed it for us. So we decided, although it's a very, very new, fresh model, and they're still trying to iron out all the kinks and all the issues, they're trying to work things out. It was only established in BMG in 2012. The band signed summer 2013, but we decided let's go for it because it seems like almost the best fit for the band, you know. So
okay, well, I mean that label services model is one which is starting to emerge as an important one, and we'll kind of pursue that in a minute. But Mark, one of the other things that's emerging here is that there's a lot more onus on the management to get things going. You know, before you do the deal, and the management would then sort of manage the relationship with the record company. Now it seems that there's a lot of investment from the management before anything starts going. Could you say something about how the management would kind of protect themselves? Because one of the things that I know, having been in the business for quite a while, is that one of the key jobs of a manager is to get sacked. and it's important that obviously if you're going to put in all that work, you need to have some kind of protection. What kind of deals are in place now so the management has some degree of protection?
Well, it's very true what you say, and I'm sure both you and I have been on the end of that in the past. I've managed as well as being a lawyer. There's only one certainty in management, and that is that one day you're going to get fired. So Keith's absolutely right. Because the business has shrunk and has become more cautious, the major labels now are looking outside for people to develop artists. They really only want to take on artists when they're absolutely sure that the sales are there. I mean, I spoke to an A&R person last year who said to me, look, you know, unless it looks like it's got a reasonable chance of being a platinum album, I just can't sign it, you know, because the way we're set up here in the major labels is that we're not set up to sell small quantities of records. So managers have increasingly become, if you like, incubators of talent, and the problem with a management contract, for those of you in the audience who are managers, is that there's nothing in the world that can stop an artist firing you. you can't compel an artist to work with you if they don't want to, even though you may have put in an awful lot of effort and work to get them to where they are. They can get rid of you just like that. It merely becomes a matter of compensation. So if you had a 3-year management deal with someone and the artist unreasonably fired you after 12 months, you're really just talking about what compensation are you going to get for missing out on the other 2 years. You may have to take the initiative yourself and go to court if the artist won't talk to you. So, and you know, as a manager with not much money, you may not be able to afford that. So it's sort of fraught with difficulties. So one of the things that managers have started to do is to say, okay, look, if you want me to put you in the studio and, you know, you want me to pay for some recordings and you want me to effectively act as your record label in helping you get those recordings out, then I am going to look for something more than just management. I want some kind of production agreement with you where, you know, we'll decide whether we're going to put this out independently, whether we're going to try and license it to a major label. But if I'm putting in all this time and financial investment, then I'm going to want something more than just management. I'm going to want some kind of recording, production type agreement with you. And I think most managers nowadays would not invest in an artist unless they had that kind of arrangement. Now, sometimes managers don't need to invest in artists. I mean, if the artist has already got a record deal or comes to a manager just as they're about to get a record deal, then the manager won't need to invest. But if an artist is coming to a manager at a much earlier stage in their career and are expecting the manager to invest money, then expect them to be looking for more than just a management deal with you.
Okay, so both Michael and Denise, you were talking about obviously going the independent route and maybe bringing a third party, like a label services company, into the equation. What kind of services do they offer, Michael? What's the attraction of that?
Maybe Denise.
Or maybe Denise, yeah, because you've actually got into that.
It would probably be different depending on the company, and it would also depend on the level of artists you're bringing in and the level of management and their knowledge and their connections in the industry. But I would say generally you need to come in from a management perspective with quite a lot of ideas about where you want to go, because the onus is on you, the onus is on the manager. And for us, we started to set up our promotion team, our marketing. We have a say in all of that. If we don't know who, our UK press guy is going to be, we ask our representative in BMG, what do you think? Do you have input here? Have you heard of anybody that's good? Or, we're a wee bit lost here. Then he will definitely, do whatever, bring somebody in and make some recommendations, set up some meetings. But I guess at the end of the day, a lot of it depends on, the manager. We had a lot of say in everything. In the direction of the campaign and the people that, were coming on board as well. So nothing, that happens, it's all ran through ourselves, every single aspect of it, and that includes finances as well. So it's very, very transparent, and it's a very collaborative nature, and it needs to be, because the infrastructure within the company is so basic that a lot of the responsibility really, ends up with us.
So what exactly do they do for you?
They give us lots of money.
Okay, it's a good start.
They also have an international team. So across Europe, we'll have a representative in each of, the major countries. We've also got somebody in the US. So it's really, that part was really important, because we felt like if we truly go alone with the act being at the level that they're at, I don't think we could really maximise on everything. We needed some cushion, we needed some guarantee. I don't think Dean and I felt confident enough that we could actually, deal with everything that was involved. And I think that was the right choice, because even as we're going on, and even for the basic collaboration for what they offer, it's really, really hard going. It's really, stressful at times, and it can become extremely complex, especially when the product that you're putting out is different in different territories, and there's so many different formats. So for us, we really needed something there that would back us up and help us, maximise and releasing the record for the band.
Okay. And Michael, you've done a much more traditional distribution type thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that's a great point about the international aspect as well, because for us, it's about manageable to do it in the UK, because we understand how the business works here, but we've not really put anything in place yet outside the UK, and I think when we go to do that, we're really going to need some support like that, because you need to know how things work in a different territory. So, I think that I do think that that's a good point.
And distribution-wise here, what kind of a deal have you done? How does that work?
So we've done a deal with a company called Proper Music, who essentially distribute the physical products into the various sort of shops and onto Amazon as well. And then we've done a digital deal with a company called Fine Tunes. And they've, both have been really helpful in terms of getting us into the stores and getting us noticed by the stores, And again, that's something that a company like Emu Bands can do, The Orchard can do, and really just to help you get the music in front of the likes of iTunes, Deezer, Spotify, and give you the best chance of getting them featured and getting that little bit extra prominence, which really does make a big difference.
Are there things that you should be looking out for in these deals, Mark?
I was just going to say, the first thing that strikes me is, did Proper put a lot of pressure on you to give them the digital distribution? How did you arrive at that decision where you split the digital and the physical? Because I've noticed that a lot of the physical distributors are desperately trying to get the digital rights as well.
We expected to be pressed really hard on it, and to be honest, they were cool with it. We said we're more than happy to look at it again, further down the line, but let's just see how things go at first, and they were totally fine.
Because one of the difficulties sometimes in the digital world, you can get too many middlemen taking a cut. You'll have the distributor, you'll have these people called aggregators that sort of deal with the likes of iTunes and the like. But just from a kind of legal point of view, if you like, the difference between doing it the label services way, which is basically the major labels, the Sonys, the Universals, the Warners of this world, Cobalt, who've come along as quite a big player in recent years. I would say that they tend to suit artists who already have a following. They have a fan base and a means to communicate with that fan base. I think they're the kind of artists that those label service companies are interested in. It may typically be an artist that's come out of a major deal. Either they've been dropped or they've decided that they don't want to renew with the record label. I think it's difficult for a new artist to get one of those label service type deals. So you're more likely to end up with the kind of distribution arrangement that Michael's talking about. In terms of what they offer you, from the label service point of view, I think one of the reasons why managers are attracted to those kind of deals is they do the things that managers are not good at, and that is things like handling manufacturing, handling the payments to the collection societies like MCPS and those kind of things. I managed an artist who had an album out through one of those label service deals. It was EMI when it was still in existence. And my emails went up 5-fold during that campaign, where I was getting huge amounts of emails. I don't know whether you come across this, huge amounts of emails from EMI, who were the distributor. I was running a team I had a plugger, a TV plugger, online PR, print PR, booking agents, all these people are kind of communicating with you. You effectively become the record company. And I have to say, I didn't particularly enjoy the experience as a manager. That's very probably because the album didn't do that well. If the album, because when you were talking earlier about the payment method, if the album does well through a distribution deal as opposed to a record deal, you're probably earning 5 or 6 times as much as an artist as you would be in a normal record deal. However, if the album doesn't do well, you may owe the distributor money at the end, and we can maybe come on to that a bit later. The difference between a record deal and a distribution deal is, in a record deal, if a record company gives you a lot of money and the album stiffs completely, you don't owe that money back. With a distribution deal, you might.
Okay, just go into that a little bit more, Mark, just so that people are quite clear how that would work.
Well, typically a distributor will charge you a commission of, I mean, I've just made some notes here. I mean, if you're a big, independent, successful label like Beggars, and all the labels on Beggars, then you might be paying sort of, the distributor might be taking sort of 12, 15% per record sold. So if a record sells to the dealers, the retailers, if you like, a CD, physical CD would sell at about, you might have a dealer price of around about £7. Then the distributor will take, let's say, I don't know what Beggars are paying their distributor, let's say for a big label around about 15%. If you're a new label, they might be taking as much as 25%. Now, the difficulty is that they charge that for every record they ship out, but if records start coming back, then they'll charge you a smaller commission, what they call a handling fee, for taking the records that come back from the retailers that haven't sold. So for a record that hasn't sold, you might have paid 25% on it going out and maybe 5% on it coming back, and yet you've received nothing. So you have to be careful in how you structure these deals with distributors.
Okay, so go on to something else. One of the ways of breaking through, and it's become increasingly important, is brand deals, synchronization deals, the kind of things that people come to you and say, we really want to use your song on this TV program, movie, whatever it happens to be. And Denise, I'd like to hear from you for a start. Do you find that easier now? Now that you're saying you're kind of in control of all the aspects of the artist's work, rather than before when you maybe had to consult with the record company, consult with the publisher and so on?
Because the record company and the publishing company is now one, then the level of bureaucracy is dramatically decreased. So it's as quick as a phone call, really, 5 minutes.
And have you found this happening more because of that?
It's just a lot easier to do, whereas there was several hoops to jump through before with both Columbia and Universal, so it just took a bit longer, and sometimes that can put people off because sometimes things need to be processed very, very quickly, and there's the potential for losing an opportunity, which obviously we're trying to avoid at all costs. So it's just a smoother process to go through.
I would totally agree with that. It's especially for us, we're working with acts at a really early stage. We just can't afford to miss those opportunities. It's as simple as that. The money might be okay, the exposure's going to be good. So retaining all those rights and just being able to say, yep, we can do that, no problem.
Also, I think also the number of bodies involved before. There could have been conflict between Columbia and Universal about difference of opinions, on if somebody wanted approval and somebody else didn't. So all these things can really hamper the approval time period, which is quite a crucial thing. So the less people that are involved, the quicker it is and the easier it is.
Okay, so let's go to something quite practical, which I think a lot of people who are releasing a record for the first time might want to know. Earlier on you were talking about Mark was certainly talking about getting emails from pluggers and PR people and sync agents and so on and so forth. How do you go about finding a plugger or a PR company?
We generally do a fair bit of digging around. We're kind of lucky, or maybe we're not lucky in Scotland, that there aren't too many PR companies, and there's certainly not very many that do it well. So the ones that do it well really stick out. And so we found a regional PR in Scotland that was doing a great job for one of our acts, and we offered him all the others. So the regional PR was in place. That was quite straightforward. With the others, it was a case of looking at other acts that were similar to the artist, and having a look at their campaigns. Did it do well in the press? Didn't it do well? And why was that? And then tracing back to who they worked with, and then starting conversations with, I suppose, 2 or 3 different companies and seeing what their thoughts are, getting a feel for it, and also how invested they are in it, and you quickly, you're able to filter a lot out quite quickly. There's companies that just come in with a huge retainer and they're not willing to negotiate on it. And, you know, if you're a small company or you're an independent artist, you don't necessarily have a lot of money to front up on a campaign. So if you can work with a PR company that are willing to put something in or are happy to invoice at the end instead, it makes your decisions a bit easier as well, you know. So that's how we went about working with PRs. We also do get a fair bit of interest from various PRs and pluggers and that kind of thing. I suppose it's a case of doing your research on what they've done, how good they are, how thorough they are, and what results they're yielding.
Denise, you've obviously got quite long-standing relationships with a lot of the people you work with, presumably. But how do you filter out, you know, approaches? Because presumably, when you've got an act as big as Glasvegas, people kind of approach you wanting to do their PR and want to do their marketing and so on and so forth. What makes the difference in the choices you make?
Well, before, you know, I guess it's just the feeling that you get from that person, because if their CV is pretty impressive and you've met 3 people and they're all pretty impressive, then I guess it's the connection and their understanding of the artist and the music. But in saying that, after listening to the last panel, I think I go about things quite differently now, because it was really interesting when I was listening to Michelle and Vic. I would actually skip now the having maybe direct meetings with people and go to the radio folk or go to, I say, maybe journalists or whoever, and actually ask them now, who do you recommend? So that's different from now on.
I was just going to say exactly that you know, because we get approaches even for the acts that we're working with at quite a low level, we get quite a lot of pluggers and PRs looking for work. And we're lucky to be able to touch base with Vic and Ali McRae and say, you know, so if a plugger gets in touch, the first thing that I'll do is forward it on to Ali, who's a friend, and say, what do you think of this plugger? And, you know, 9 times out of 10 he'll reply and say, yeah, maybe not these guys. You should think about working with these guys. And you're right. Recommendations are the best way. If someone's happy with the people they're working with, they're definitely going to...
Can I just say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I know Michelle mentioned one plugger today, and she said it was a throwaway comment, something like, if something comes in from this particular plugger, it's always worth a listen. Now, I happen to know that plugger. And he's incredibly fussy. I've recommended, I reckon, 10 things to him over the last 7 or 8 years. He hasn't actually gone for one of them. And that's how these pluggers keep their reputations. The best pluggers are known for only taking on stuff that's good. So I think that's one of the things you have to ask yourself, is if somebody's saying, yeah, I can get you plays for this, and, you know, 500 quid or whatever, you know, the next question is, okay, but are they going to... You know, do they mean anything? You've got to do a bit of research on them and see if you can find out what their roster is and what success they've had.
Can I ask you to follow on from that, Mark, and talk about the kind of deals that people could expect to be offered? Because again, when you come in from the outside and somebody approaches you and say, look, I'll plug your record, you have no idea whether you're being offered a sensible deal or a bad deal.
They're all going to start off saying, okay, to plug your single will cost you £2,000, and then if I get you a Radio 1B list, there's a bonus of this, and if I get you a Radio 1A list, there's a bonus of this and that. You know, I think at an independent level, you're probably going to get someone to do it, you know, £1,000 or something. I'm talking about the sort of the London-based pluggers that are aiming at the, you know, the Radio 1s, the Radio 2s, the KISS, these sort of stations. Best deal I've ever done with, you know, a top-notch plugger was I had to turn up at his office with £500 in cash, so he didn't put it through the books and have to you know, do the VAT and all that. And I'm talking about somebody who's very well known as a plugger. That's the best deal I ever did.
So is he going to go to jail? Right, I'd like to open it up to the audience now and see what questions you'd like to ask, because obviously this is your moment.
First quick question is, in terms of physical releases, is it fair to say the majority of releases are sale or return when you distribute?
I think it's increasingly going that way. I mean, it is difficult. It's not quite as simple as saying that it is sale or return, but you see shops are allowed to, in their deals with the record companies, are allowed to return a certain percentage each month. So let's say they were allowed to return 10% of the records they bought. The problem is, your record, you know, if there's 5 copies of your record in that shop, they could all come back. because it's across the board 10% for the label. So, you know, I think you have to increasingly take the view nowadays that it almost is sale or return. And I say this is the difficulty when you're dealing with distributors, why you shouldn't go too crazy in pressing up and releasing too many, because if you put 5,000 copies out there and 4,000 come back, you're going to end up in trouble. So be cautious in terms of how many you're pressing and putting out there.
I'm in a band. We're in quite an interesting position in that we have a deal with a very small record label based in London, and we have a manager up here. But it's not really a very formal situation with our manager. It's kind of like us three are kind of a little gang, and then there's the label down south. We're going to probably be releasing another album in this year. Would you have any advice on what to do about formalising our relationship with our manager and our label in the future, like pending another release? Because the manager's going to be doing quite a lot of the work that the label would have traditionally have done.
Yeah. Usually what happens, I mean, I tend to deal with artists at the stage where someone is interested in them, either a manager or a publisher or a record company or a production company. And what usually happens is it's up to the management to get some sort of document drafted if they want to formalise the arrangement with you. So usually what happens is an artist will come in and see me and they've been presented with a management contract, at which point I will then help them negotiate it. And the same with labels as well. Usually the contract comes from the label. So it's quite surprising in a way that in your situation that you've had people who have been willing to work with you and presumably invest some money without asking for that to be formalised. But I mean, equally from your point of view, you need to know the key things. I mean, the key things in any contract are really how long's it for? Where does it cover? You know, is it just the UK? Is it the world? What do I get paid? And when do I get paid? These kind of things, really. So it does pay to have these things in a formal document, because while nobody's making money, it's not that important. But you know, I'm sure you'll all have heard the old music business saying, "Where there's a hit, there's a writ." So you know, you at some stage it would make sense to get a written document to cover those relationships.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, let me just ask both Michael and Denise. We're talking about the modern way of managing a release. Do you think it's actually better now, when the manager's being asked to do a lot more, or did you prefer it in the olden days when effectively you were kind of managing the label going about releasing the product?
I mean, I've never done it any other way. I've never worked with a record company or a big record company.
That's because you're nice and young.
Right, yeah. Well, so it's hard, you know. So I don't know what it's like to work with a record company, but I think at the early stages, it's better to do the extra work, make sure that it's done really well, and retain the rights than it is to do a deal that isn't very good, that restricts you further down the line. But I do think that what I don't want to do is to start trying to compete with record companies and record labels, because I don't have the skills that they've got. So we can do it at a small level, but you know, like Denise was saying, I would definitely not be confident about taking on something at a higher level, and you would want to have that team in place for the people that have got the experience, or you know, if you're working with a niche act, I would rather sign them to a label that's really credible, that does that kind of thing. So I think that, you know, I guess it's a balancing act, and in an ideal world, we'd be working with a great record label who are going to put a lot of money up front, and they're going to really work the release. But if they're not willing to do that, I would rather that we took on that extra work and just sucked it up.
There is a big difference.
Okay. Which do you prefer, I think, was the question. I mean, did you prefer it when you were working with a label, or when you've got so much more responsibility?
It has different pros and cons, to be honest. It's just it feels like almost like doing a different job. Mm-hmm. It can be when you're on a major label for a start. You know, a lot of other people make decisions for you, so you have more time to concentrate in certain aspects of managing. When you're on a label services deal, master rights deal, then a lot of the onus falls on you. Therefore, a lot of responsibility, a lot of stress, a lot of your time is taken up. But at the same time, when you actually see the record out in a store in, wherever, New York, it's the most fulfilling experience ever, because you know that you have been integral to that happening. So in that respect, I guess I feel more fulfilled when it's more independent, but it is more stressful.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the major difference between having a record label involved as an artist signed to a label and doing it the independent route, or through one of these label service deals, or through a proper distribution or someone like that, is the A&R function falls in the manager's lap if you're not with a major label. Now that can be a good and a bad thing. I've sort of had experiences of both, really. I remember one artist I managed where this artist was on a major label and I was the manager, and me and the artist turned up for a meeting with the chairman of the record company, and the chairman said, "I'm not putting the album out. You haven't got a hit. You've got to go away and write a hit or find a hit, but we are not putting the album out until then." So we both walked out with our noses in the air. I secretly agreed with the record company chairman, but what I did was I managed to get a big wad of cash out of the label, almost in a way of saying sorry to the artist for delaying it. So the artist was, although not happy, as a manager, I'd proved my worth. I hadn't managed to get this guy to change his mind and put the album out, but at least I'd got this artist a bunch of cash to keep them quiet until they found a hit. They subsequently found a hit and had a big album. Now, I had another experience with another artist who released through one of these label services deals, but suddenly, as the manager, I was in charge of the A&R function. I had to say to this artist, "I don't think you've got a hit. I don't think this album's going to do that well without a hit." I was overruled, and the album came out and was a failure. And it's funny, you say, which is better? I don't know. But I must admit, at that moment in time, where, much to my despair, I was proved right, I remember thinking, God, I wish there had been some big bullying record company chairman there telling me he wasn't putting the album out until there was a hit, because I'm the one who has to do it. And that's the difficulty for the manager. You don't. The relationship with the artist is different to the record company artist relationship, and sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not quite so good.
So, have you found similar stress, Mike? You seem to be very relaxed about your.
Yeah, it's early days. We've barely done anything yet, so it's hard to. Yeah, I think that is also a worry, is that those conflicts and the financial aspects as well. There's a million ways that you could set it up, and it's something that you need to consider because you are taking on a lot of extra work. So then, should you be commissioning more from the artist? But is that going to create problems? And so, yeah, I think that it's something that you really have to think long and hard about. But for me, it ultimately comes down to being in control and being able to retain the rights, so that at a later date you're able to do the deal that you want to do.
Okay, and Denise, I've been asking you all the hard ones today, so I'm going to ask you an even harder one. Okay. Not everybody, but it seems to be that a lot of people are being advised, you don't need a record company anymore. Do it all yourself. Is that advice that you would give to somebody starting out to release a record now? Can you realistically do it yourself and have international success?
It depends. I would say, I think that for the majority, they probably won't have international success, because that would probably go with a whole bunch of other factors that an individual maybe can't get in place, or a company that is super, super small and inexperienced might not be able to do. The chances are, if you want to be massive, you probably sign with a major or quite a large independent. That's the tried and tested route where the majority of success are, but it's not to say that it would always happen like that, so I would never ever say that route is guaranteed, because there's always the flukes, and you could never ever predict, who that will be. So that's, yeah.
I was just going to say, can we, to turn it round almost, can we think of any internationally successful artist that is not signed to a major label or a big independent? I can't.
Okay. Well, I think that actually, believe it or not, we're out of time. So I'd really like to thank Denise Allan, Mark Melton, Michael Lambert, and I hope you got something out of it. Thanks a lot.